you're standing in an open field, face to face with the king of the beasts. You've seen lions in books and in zoos, but never out in the open, out of the cage. Well, what do? You could run. You could stand frozen in fear. Or you could chase it. As crazy as it sounds, 2 Samuel 23:20 relates the story of a man named Benaiah who went down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. From the books we read, to the movies we watch, to the men and women we admire, we value adventure. We like to see great exploits, daring deeds, and dauntless heroism. But when it comes to our own lives, we often fall short in exemplifying these virtues. In a survey I conducted with 26 people, I found that only 5 of them considered themselves adventurous. The rest ranged from somewhat to not at all. Now, this is a limited survey, but according to this, it shows that only about 1 out of every 5 people considers his or herself adventurous. We often fail to live like the heroes or heroines that we so esteem. But as Aesop said, adventure is worthwhile. In the next few minutes, we will first look at the risks that we must face in adventure, the inevitable rewards, and then the consequences of complacency. And perhaps we will find that adventure is indeed worthwhile. Now, in adventure, we must take risks. But what exactly is an adventure? According to Webster's dictionary, an adventure is an enterprise of hazard, or a bold undertaking in which hazards are to be encountered, and the issue is staked upon unforeseen events. From this, we can see that there are 2 kinds of risk: real risk and perceived risk. So what is a real risk? In perhaps the most classic example of adventure, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, Bilbo Baggins faces just about every kind of conceivable risk. He faces trolls, goblins, spiders the size of dogs, not to mention a dragon. These are all real risks. Essentially, a real risk is any danger that could happen within reason. But not all adventures are wrought with such extreme peril. And there is another kind of risk: perceived risk. An adventure is staked upon unforeseen events. This leaves us to think about all of the horrible things that might happen. But a perceived risk may never happen. This kind of risk is the more dangerous, the more crippling of the 2. Franklin D. Roosevelt describes the effect that perceived risks can have. "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which cripples needed efforts to convert retreats into advance." If you're afraid of going to bed because you thought the boogeyman was hiding in your closet, this would be a perceived risk. Now, about 6 years ago, my parents forced me to join speech. I didn't want to, but they would not hear my pleadings as they sent me off to a slow, painful death every other Friday. Why didn't I want to do speech? There were no real risks. I would not have to look death in the face, experience intense pain, or sell my inheritance and left kidney to pay for it. I dreaded speech because of the perceived risks, the fear of the unknown, the fear of not knowing how my audiences would react to what I said, fear of forgetting my next line. My mind took the unknowns of speech and spun them into a massive web of fear. Ultimately, it was a fear of failing. This is why perceived risk is so much more crippling than real risk. So if the dangers are so great, then why go on an adventure? Why take the risk? Because the risks are like a price tag on a beautiful gem. In adventure, the risks come with rewards. And just as there are 2 kinds of risk, there are 2 kinds of reward: material and intangible. So what are material rewards? Well, anything they can be anything you see, like money. Intangible rewards, however, cannot be seen so easily. Intangible rewards you gain as you go through your adventure. Material rewards you gain at the end. And if you fail, you will not get your material reward, the goal. But you will gain the intangible rewards, regardless of success or failure. So what did Bilbo Baggins gain? Well, first of all, he gains a fortune in gold and silver. By the end of his travels, he has made many friends, most of whom are extremely powerful. Essentially, he has the social connections of a king. But more than this, Bilbo gains a new perspective on life. Tolkien writes, the sound of the kettle on his hearth was ever after more musical than it had been in the quiet days. At the end of his travels, Gandalf, another friend of Bilbo, tells him, "My dear Bilbo, you are not the hobbit that you were." Adventure changes you. It changed me. Through all of my heartache and anxiety of speech, I didn't gain a fortune in gold or silver, yet, or become a world-renowned speaker. But I have had the opportunity to meet some exceptional people. I've become more confident, not just as a speaker, but as a person. I'm not the same person that I was. Now you may be hearing all of this and thinking, oh, that's all right, but sometimes the risks are too great. Sometimes it's much wiser to just play it safe. However, this is not always the case. I have decided to believe that the consequences of complacency are worse than those of failing. Michelangelo once said, "The great danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark." If Bilbo had not gone on his adventure as he badly wanted to, what would he have gained? Nothing. He would have never known, and he certainly wouldn't have had a book written about it. Looking back, I realize how much I would have missed if my parents had let me have my own way. I wouldn't have gained anything. If my parents had not forced me to join speech class, I would not be standing in front of you right now. C.S. Lewis once said, "It might be hard for an egg to turn into a bird. It would be a jolly sight harder for it to learn to fly while remaining in the egg. We are all like eggs at present, and you cannot go on indefinitely being just an ordinary, decent egg. You must be hatched or go bad." If we are worried about failing, then we need to think about this. It was the failure that shaped me more than anything. Losing at a tournament built humility and patience in me, while motivating me to work harder. Now, while I'm not suggesting you rank me any lower, isn't that so much more worthwhile than any prize or trophy? Everything worthwhile comes at a price. Complacency is worse than failure. When Peter walked out onto the water to meet Jesus, though he sank, I would imagine that Jesus was more disappointed with the other disciples sitting safely in the boat. Think of a dream that you have. That dream will not accomplish itself. Fortune favors the brave, so we must ask ourselves, will I take the risks necessary? Do I have the courage to step out onto the water where Jesus is? We have seen that we must take risks in adventure, but that the rewards are worth the risk, and the consequences of complacency are worse than failing. Now, what happened to Benaiah? Well, after he killed the lion and did several other exploits, King David appointed him over his royal guard. Later, Solomon made him general over the entire Israelite army. Now think, if Benaiah had seen the lion and run, or worse off, become a snack, what would he have gained? Nothing. He would have never become David's bodyguard, much less Solomon's general. Do you think he would have been written about in the Bible? Everyone faces lines in their lives, and no one can deny that there are risks. But which is worse, trying and failing, or failing to try? Theodore Roosevelt expressed this sentiment when he said, "Far greater is it to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in a gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." Thank you.